The economic road ahead is, by all accounts, likely to be bumpy, prolonging the financial distress caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and further exacerbated by the knock-on effects of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Both inflation and interest rates are rising, increasing the cost of most basics such as food, transport, housing and debt. Most households are worried about their finances, and some may decide to abandon their new year financial goals. Now, let's discuss this. We're now joined via Zoom by Motshabi Nomvethe, Head of Technical Marketing at Professional Provident Society. Motshabi, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, of course, July is National Savings Month, but I'm sure most South Africans will ask, how can one even begin to talk about saving during such hard economic times? How do they navigate?
The reality is, yes, it is very difficult under the current circumstances. But if we just take a few steps back, where this has to start is with a budget. I think we take budgeting so for granted, and the impact of not budgeting is partly, and not completely, partly what has obviously led to the situation that we are in now. Obviously, we've got no control over the economy and how that works, but starting with the budget, because that in itself will let you know how much do I have, and therefore how much can I spend, and also it will help you to see, am I spending my money on the right things, and then making the necessary adjustments. So a budget is so crucial to help us, especially when times are this tough.
A lot of the conversation is about, just making comparisons between last year and this year in terms of how people are spending. From a practicality perspective, where does one begin if the average food basket has gone up by roughly 11% than what we saw in 2021? So that means that people are now spending close to 5,000 rands on grocery shopping, and we know that 70% of households in this country earn under 10,000 rands. Then there's still, the fact that you have to cover other expenses. From practicality perspective, where does one even begin looking at those numbers?
Yeah, look, like we said, that the current economic environment is very tough on all households, and I don't think anybody has been spared of what is currently happening at the moment. And that's why I say we really do need to go back to basics. We need to go, what are the things that we have control over? And that's why I stress the importance of a budget. That's the first thing that we have control over. And like I say, with that will come making sacrifices. So it really then comes back also down to a question of what is a need and what is a want. So obviously your needs, you need to take care of those firstly before you go on to your wants. So then sit down and say, of the needs, what are the things that I can cut and what are the things that I can control? That is one of the things. As difficult also, like you mentioned in your first question, that this month is Savings Month. Despite the fact that things are so tough at the moment, we still have to find a little bit of money. And I mean, that obviously it can vary depending on your circumstances at that particular time. But we also have to start the culture of saving for a rainy day, but also saving for a sunny day, because there are some wants that we would want to take care of at a later stage. But those shouldn't be on a whim. We should start considering, if I'm thinking of Christmas presents, now is the time, is it budgeted for? If not, then already make the realization that, well, then I can't send Christmas presents. And who said Christmas is all about Christmas presents anyway? So those are some of the changes and mindset changes, most importantly, that we're going to need to start making so that we can live through this very horrid time. So like I said, it's really a question of go back to what is really important. What are the things that I can cut? Some of the things are really luxuries. And like I said, I think what is worrying is how we are not aware of how much we are spending on some of the items. It's like, I'm just so used to getting into a shop, swiping my card and walking out of there. So it needs to come back to making a list. If I go into a shop, be very deliberate about what is it that I need? What am I going to do with it? If you're going to buy food stuff, be careful. How much are you buying? Are you sure? Look at yourself at the end of the week. How much are you throwing out of the fridge or your cupboard because you haven't spent it or because you haven't used it or consumed it? But at the time when you're in the shop, you have this need to want to buy that. So it's little things like that. Like I said, it seems little, but trust me, those very little steps are what is going to help us ride this wave.
You've spent a lot of time talking about financial literacy. Now, how does a lack of financial literacy impact on, people's ability to cope in these challenging times, as you say?
Yeah, look, I think financial literacy, firstly, if you just understand what is the word financial literacy, because it is quite broad. Financial literacy starts with understanding what money is coming in, how do you spend it, how do you save it, how do you invest it for the long term. Things like budgeting obviously comes in there. Things like understanding your credit score, because it's easy to take out loans and credit. But do you know that with a different credit score, your rate that you are charged might be slightly different, and therefore you might be in a better position? So it's about all of that. And most importantly, what people forget also about financial literacy is then how do you protect yourself, which is where this conversation is coming in. And there's protection in two ways. The one is obviously through saving and investment, which is not always easy, and I take that. But there's also things like how do you protect your assets and other, because can we say you buy a car because now you can afford it, you find a new job, good for you. But have you thought about if you were to be in an accident, how would you protect that asset? So then, for example, that's where car insurance would come in, or insurance for your phone, or whatever it is that you use. So that is financial literacy, looking at all those 5 components and making sure that you actually makes time and space for each of those things. Coming back to, like I said, once people understand the impact of every small decision, how many of us in our first day of university, it's orientation day, you've made it past matric, you're all celebrating, and retail stores come in and they want to give you a store card. Most of us take it because we have been ill-advised or we don't know better. But do we understand how the interest on that is going to work? Do we understand that now you end up buying stuff that you don't necessarily need because I've got the card, I can swipe it and it looks cool. Why not? So those are some of the things we need to start teaching much earlier on to say, do you really need that extra card? Things like debt. There's good debt and bad debt. Do you understand the difference between the two? Do you understand what it means to take out debt and what it, how you're going to pay for it? Do you actually have a plan to pay for it? And remember also, when you make that plan, think about what if things do go wrong? What if things don't go according to plan? Would I still be able to afford this? And then do I really need it? And I mean, sometimes it's really a simple decision between if you're buying a car again, if I can pick on buying a car again, it's a question of do I buy a 1.4 or do I buy a 1.6 liter? Sometimes making just that little decision can make a huge impact on your budget and obviously your financial ability to be able to see that through. So I think we really need to often question, why do I want a certain thing? Like I say, a car is a car. Is there really such a big difference between the different engine sizes? And what does that really mean? And how will it affect you more long-term? Because that's a commitment. You're committing not to pay this thing for 5 years. Can you really afford it? And is it really going to make a difference? Or what is the purpose of a car? Is it to get me from point A to B, from work and back, and for me to do other stuff that I need to get to over the weekend? So we really need to evaluate and reevaluate how we view the needs, the so-called needs. Do we need to have the latest? Another thing that people fall into very often is what we call lifestyle inflation. So with people, especially with working people, we're all guilty of this. I get a job, yay, I get certain stuff because I'm paid X. As soon as I get promoted at work, what do? I go and upgrade everything. The house, the car, the phone, the clothes, and everything. When there was nothing wrong with the car that I had, nothing wrong with the home that I had, nothing wrong with the clothes that I was wearing. So little adjustments like that go a very long way in securing our financial security in the future.
Motshabi, as we wrap our conversation, something also that has been very worrying is that when people look at their expenses, they tend to go for things like life cover policies and cutting those out, as well as some insurances. I mean, what would you say to somebody who's listening to you right now who's considering doing that because it's just looking too bleak?
For me, that goes back to that, again, that simple thing about the need and the want. Something like life insurance, people think it's a self-enrichment scheme. It is not. Ask a family who has lost someone and they have not had money to bury that person, or worse still, have not had money to live after the breadwinner has passed on. Then you will really reevaluate the purpose of life cover. So those are some of the things where if it means I'd rather pack myself lunch when I go to work versus buying something at the canteen so that I can afford life cover, that will go a long way. And what we have found, sorry, just quickly from the survey that we have done with our students, they are actually crying for help to say, help us with financial literacy. And what we always say is, if you don't learn how to spend your first 10 Rand wisely, it's going to become difficult to learn how to spend your first 1,000 Rand, your first 10,000 Rand, and so it goes on. So we really need to nip this in the bud, teach us as young as possible how to, with that first 10 Rand, how do you split it? Have a component that you save, have a component that you can spend, and understand the why. Then we will be in a better place. But like I say, no quick fix. I can't wave a magic wand and all will be great. But I think if we just really start with the really small steps, the benefit of compound interest is part of financial literacy. And like I say, saving that, is it 5 Rand or 2 Rand from your 10 Rand, and how that will accrue interest over the long term. Those are the things that we need to be concentrating on versus, what's the value of 2 Rand from my 10 Rand, and then rather spending that. So it really, like I said, comes back to our mindset and how we really learn to use the money. And trust us, we all have the same struggles, different day, different time, but it's all the same struggles. How do we learn to use the little that we have to help us and to help our families, and obviously for us to be able to achieve the other stuff that we do want to do?
Motshabi Nomvethe, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insights.
Thanks, Dave.